Well, welcome back, folks. In today's episode, we're going to continue on with the theme of working on the rims and wheels and tires for the Suzuki TS50 project. We're going to pick up where we left off, and that is move on to the rear wheel. So this episode will be quite similar to the previous video from last week, where I'm going to break down the rear wheel assembly. It'll be a little bit different because there are some nuanced differences, of course, between the front and rear wheels, but we'll get into that in the video in just a few minutes. But first, I thought I'd give you a little bit of an update on where I'm at with some of the components for the front wheel that we took apart in the last video. We're just going to very briefly review some of the bits and pieces as I pulled them out and cleaned them and inspected them. And I'll talk about what I'm going to do next with those pieces, and then we'll move on to the disassembly of the rear wheel for the Suzuki TS50. Let's talk briefly, before we move on to the rear wheel disassembly, about where I'm at with the front wheel components. Everything's been thoroughly cleaned. You can see the brake and backer plate here. Everything here has been run through my parts tank to do the initial degreasing. The only thing left to do on this brake plate is to strip the paint, the silver paint, in my blast cabin. I'll probably use glass beads for that. Then it will be degreased with a brake cleaner or acetone, one or the other, before it goes into powder coating. So stripping of paint, degreasing, final degreasing, and then powder coating is really what's left for this brake backer plate. You can see I've got a container here. This is just a kitchen container. You can buy these at any dollar store or virtually anywhere. Quite often I use my wife's cast-offs from the kitchen for this, as she rotates her storage containers out of service and buys new every so often. I bought a package of these, this size new, recently, just because I wanted a certain size package, and I didn't have anything in my inventory that would match this. So a couple of bucks, and I think I got 3 of them for a couple of dollars. But anyway, very handy to have. You can see I've got a labeled front wheel, and inside here's all the parts for the front wheel. Let's talk about the brake shoes for a moment. I'm pretty sure these are probably original. They're Suzuki brand. You can see that right here with the Suzuki logo. I couldn't find any brake shoe specification, that is for the thickness of the wear surface right here, these brake shoes, in the service manual I obtained for this project. We've talked about that service manual several times. There was no specification at all for the brake shoes. So what I did is I went through my other Suzuki service manuals for other bikes of this period, and all of them indicated a minimum shoe thickness here of 1.5 millimeter. So I did measure these the other day, and these come in at just short of 4 millimeter. So the thickness of the brake shoes is perfectly fine and well within service specifications. Now what I will probably do, though, frankly, is rotate the front set of shoes, that would be these, to the rear hub and vice versa, because the rear hub or shoes normally receives the most wear. I have not measured those shoes for the rear hub yet, but they don't look too bad, and I think they're going to be well within service specification also. And certainly the springs there's no problem with the springs. So outside of a thorough deep clean and scuffing of the surface here, these will be rotated into the rear hub eventually when the bike gets reinstalled. The rest of the parts, again, have all been cleaned in the parts washing tank. The bearings in particular, this is the shielded bearing. I think you can probably see that there. It's perfect. There's nothing wrong with it. It's smooth as silk. Again, it's good and clean. This is the unshielded bearing. Again, this is smooth as silk, and there's no wear on it at all. So those bearings are perfectly acceptable. I did find the part number for this seal right here, and it is available from Suzuki, so I'll be ordering a new one of those. This is really a dust shield, and I cleaned it up a bit, as you can see, and I think that'll be perfectly fine and serviceable, even though you can still get those from Suzuki too. Most of the rest of these parts are completely serviceable as they are. Here's the drive pinion, the Speedo drive pinion gear. I did clean that all up and put everything back together in this own bag just to keep it together as a unit. There's 2 thrust washers in here, and it's been thoroughly degreased. That's really ready to go back in except for greasing. couple of parts are going to have to be replated, zinc plated that is. This actuating arm here, you can see the zinc is wore off here, and that is where zinc has been worn off. That's not just dirty. I did clean it thoroughly. As well as the axle, you can see at the end, I think I mentioned this before, it's got some minor tool marks. I might put this in my lathe, chuck it up, take some emery cloth and try to polish this up a little bit, and that is to get the wear marks out. If that doesn't work, I'll use my Dremel and clean that up a lot like I did, I've done on other parts that you've seen me do. And this little dust shield here as well, that's clean. It's just, again, the zinc is starting to wear off. So I have a couple of parts I'll be replating. That being, I think, these three right here, as well as probably the nut here that goes with the axle assembly. The rest of these are okay as they are. Even this cam right here looks really good. And I might brush it up a little bit or throw up my tumbler, but I think it's fine. And of course, this gasket right here, this is a seal. That'll have to be replaced. So that's where I'm at with the front wheel pieces that I will be eventually, finishing up. I won't be replating any of these parts until I got the rear wheel apart. I won't be repainting or powder coating this backer plate until I have the rear wheel apart either, because I want to set up and do all the powder coating and the zinc plating all at one time. So that's an update on the front wheel. Let's move on to breaking down the rear wheel assembly. Rear wheel assembly, I already peeled the tire off. Again, I think that is the original tire. And for a rider, again, it would probably be fine with a new tube. I certainly wouldn't ride it on the road because it's significantly worn and it's got some checks in it. But for a rider around the trails, around your house, it'd probably be fine, but it's not going to work for restoration. The tube, again, this is a no-name, no-label tube. Whether it's new or not, I don't know. It has been patched once, right here. You can see this is Atlas two-way, and it looks like it was very well done in terms of the patch. In fact, there's a couple of patches. There's two of them. I think you can see them right there, here and here. So clearly this tube has been out before and been repaired. Again, whether it's original, I have no idea. The brakes, the brake backer plate, a little rougher shape than the front, not surprising given the conditions it has to survive in. You can see the paint is flaking off. Certainly this pivot arm, this brake actuator will have to be replated. I don't think there's anything wrong with it outside of being having to be plated. Looks like there's a little bit of a scuffing on that bolt right there. The brake shoes, again, we talked about this a moment ago for the front wheel. Haven't measured these, but these look like they've got plenty of meat on them as well. They're probably north of 3 millimeters. And again, remember, I think 1.5 is about the minimum. So this will be all disassembled, of course. The hub itself, besides delacing of the wheel, this rim, by the way, is in quite a bit worse shape. It's not bad condition for its age, but it's in worse shape than the front wheel, both from a scuffing perspective as well as some peeling and flaking of the chrome in through here, probably on both sides. I haven't really examined it closely, but again, perfectly serviceable for a rider or a little trail bike, or even a reconditioning project, but not near good enough, or at least for me, for a true restoration. I'll measure the inside of the wheel or the hub. Again, there is a minimum spec of 110.7 millimeter. The cushions right here, you can see the rubber cushions, they're pretty well shot. There's not much left of those. They're brittle. There's pieces missing. You can get those also from Suzuki, brand new. At least they're listed in the parts fish, and this is all one unit here. This whole unit comes out, so I'll be getting that out here shortly. And then really the only other thing outside of delacing of the rim from the hub is getting the bearings out. Again, you got a shielded bearing right here, and another bearing right here that's shielded. They both look like shielded bearings. They're probably the same size. I haven't investigated that yet, but we'll get those out here shortly as well. So what we're going to start by doing first is we'll get this hub apart. Again, that'll be a very quick disassembly. Remove the arm and pop the shoes off. You're going to go ahead and pop these shoes off and just fold them off like that. You don't need to wrestle with these. You just fold them off. Now we'll go ahead and take this pivot off. Sometimes those don't come off that easy, but obviously that one did. Again, there's a washer behind it. And then there's the pivot. Looks like that's been greased recently as well, probably by the previous owner. Like some of the other components have been greased, like fresh grease. And there's a seal right there, a little rubber seal. So that's it really for the hub. Or rather the brake backer plate. Let me get that seal back out of there. I shouldn't have put that back in. And again, it'll be degreased in the tank and then stripped of the finish, the paint. And at that point, it'll be ready for powder coating. And these shoes get a little dirty, but I think they're serviceable. Springs look good. Next stop on this journey is to do the delacing of the hub from the rim. That is, removing the spokes and nipples and setting the spokes and nipples and rim aside. You will not be seeing those again in this series of videos because I'll be done with them. They will be replaced with new. I've talked about that already several times. So we'll pick up the video on the other side when this is apart and we can start getting into the hub itself, and that is removing the cushion right here for the sprocket carrier, and then getting the bearings out from each side, and then this wheel disassembly will be half an hour or so later. And as you can see, I've got the wheel apart. I'm not going to spend a lot of time again commenting on this outside of all of the spokes were very tight, which I find unusual on a bike of this age. In this size, I would expect to find a few loose spokes. So that indicates to me that the previous owner went around and tightened all the spokes because they were good and tight. Not kind of tight, they were tight. And there are a couple of bent spokes in here in these sets that I did not run into with the front wheel. So again, we're pretty much done with those parts until we get on to replacing them and perhaps sewing these off. The hub itself, what we're going to do now is remove this hub cushion. That's really for the sprocket. And then we're going to drive the bearings out from each side. To get this sprocket cushion out of here, and you can see it actually fits down around the hub right there. I think what I'm going to do is just take a screwdriver, a flat bladed screwdriver, and see if I can't get up underneath here and start getting this to move like that. This is going to be replaced anyway. It's pretty hard, and you can see it's beat up, damaged, so we'll replace that. Now I've got to get inside of this hub. I'm going to heat this. There's shielded bearings on both sides. I'm going to heat this boss and then drive the bearings out just like I did on the front wheel. So I got to rig up my heat gun here and get started with that, and we'll bring it over. There, that should be good and hot. Turn this over and see if we can't get this bearing out. And there it is, right there, with the spacer. Good and hot. So we'll set that aside. So now we're going to do the same thing here. Even though that hub's fairly hot, I'm going to heat this and then we'll drive that out. I'll do the same thing. And bingo. There's the second bearing. It's got plenty of grease. Both of them have plenty of grease. It's a different color grease than the other bearings that we've talked about, which is that pinkish purplish grease. So I'm not sure the previous owner greased these or not, but they've got plenty of grease in them, and I'm guessing that those bearings are going to be just fine as well. It's cooled down a little bit by now. So these will now be tanked. All of these parts will be tanked like I did on the front wheel. I will clean everything up really good, get all the old grease off, do a little bit of an inspection, and then move on to powder coating of the hubs, the brake backer plates, replace any parts that need to be replaced, such as this cushion for the rear sprocket, and then we'll be ready at that point. Once we've got all that done, once we've got the powder coating done, then we can move on to reassembling the wheels with new rims, new spokes, new nipples, etc. So we're going to call this video a wrap right now, folks. I got the wheel all apart. That is the rear wheel apart. Now it broke down as far as it needs to go, and we'll clean it up, and we'll continue on with reassembly another time. Any issues, questions, thoughts, drop me a note. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for watching.